Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Found in Interpretation podcast. Once again, I'm one of your co-hosts, Alain Breton, and I'm here with Brian. Brian, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. It's another beautiful day.
Yes, great. And I'm here also with Razan Roumany. How you doing, Razan?
Good, good. How are you?
Always great. So let's kick it. Razan is a medical interpreter with training in remote simultaneous interpretation. Her background, Arab American, grew up hearing French and Arabic, which sparked her passion for interpretation. She holds a master's degree in translation and interpretation studies from the University of Illinois at Urbana Campaign, if I read that correctly. Bachelor's degree in Spanish and pre-med, pre-physician assistant, Southeast Missouri State University. So, and her ultimate goal to work as an Arabic to Spanish simultaneous interpreter. Did I miss anything?
Nope.
I would like to know first about your background and how you got into interpretation because I can see. Okay, so Arab American. So are you right now in the United States?
I am, yeah. I'm in the US.
You're in the U.S. and I'm guessing you're in either Missouri. No, maybe first that was for studies. Maybe you're in Illinois.
I'm in Missouri, close.
Missouri.
Not too
Okay,
far
I
from
got it the
Illinois.
first time. And what about the language background? Because that's very interesting. There's Arabic, there's French, there's Spanish, and I'm sure there's English somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, so I ended up we were required to take 2 years of a foreign language in high school. And I wanted to take French because I'm half Lebanese, so it made sense that I studied French. But I ended up taking Spanish, and I made that decision because it is more commonly spoken here in the U.S. Than French. So I ended up having, I took 2 years. I took a few years of Spanish in high school, and I was like, I don't want to lose it. So I ended up studying it throughout college, and I ended up getting a bachelor's in Spanish.
But at home, the language spoken was I saw French and Arabic. So are you? That's what I read. No.
No, you're right. I grew up. The reason why I said I grew up hearing French is because I my my uncle married a woman who was French speaking, and I remember
Oh.
constantly hearing my mom's side of the family speak in French. And honestly, I was kind of a little jealous that I was never able to understand them, and that pushed me to learn French. But I've always spoken in Arabic with my family for the most part.
I have a few Lebanese friends, and their ability to go from French to Arabic in like the
Yeah.
same sentence even is awesome.
Three languages spoken in one sentence. It's a thing.
Yes,
The
yes.
Lebanese language is a thing.
So and then when you did your bachelor's degree, you were going, I guess, in the medical field, but then you turned into to interpretation.
Yeah, I had this I had this love for medicine. I still do. I like medicine. I think the human body's fascinating. But I began, having doubts about going into med school. I wasn't sure if that's what I wanted. And I've ever since I was little, I've always been the biggest language geek, and medical interpretation just it clicked. And I was like, oh, my last semester of college, I decided to change gears completely, and rather than take the MCAT and apply to med school, I decided to apply to the U of I Urbana Champaign, and I ended up doing a master's in interpretation and translation studies.
Um,
Wow.
and what does that consist of there? Like, is it 50/50 translation interpretation courses or?
You take a bunch of translation courses and conference interpreting courses, and I ended up going the interpreting route, but the degree is, the title is interpreting translation and interpreting. Yeah.
Okay, so were there different options? Like you can either do conference interpretation or like consecutive, more community interpretation, or is it just only focused on conference?
Yeah, you can go the translation route or the interpretation route.
I
The
see.
conference interpreting route, or like the more of the translation.
Wow.
Cool.
So and is it like I don't know if you've ever seen both Brian and I went to Glendon to do
Hmm.
a master's, and at Glendon there was like several booths, and you had that like they really tried to simulate the real life setting.
The real
Were
thing.
there any booth during your training at the university?
Unfortunately, during my training, it was during COVID.
Oh, like me.
So
Exactly, it was
yeah,
Brian. Brian as
I
well.
yeah, I did my master's peak pandemic, and my professor was like, well, I'd let you into a booth, but you have a booth mate obviously, and you have to be 6 feet apart, and it was too complicated. So I ended up unfortunately not getting I didn't get the opportunity to go into a real booth, unfortunately.
Yeah, actually, I had my first opportunity to see the booths at Glendon College last month when Alain went to visit this year's cohort, and I went as well, and yeah, that was my first time seeing these booths that I was promised, but didn't get to use during COVID.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah.
And I don't think you went inside the booth, Brian. You forgot.
Yeah, I didn't go inside. No, I
Yeah.
just I was too busy talking to people as usual.
So, so that was quite a thing. But basically, you were expecting to work in a booth. You got your training online, and nowadays we work a lot online. Or what about you? Do you get to work more on site, online, remote, both, anything?
Yeah, when I first started out my career, I was mostly online, and rarely did I, get an opportunity to walk into a clinic. But now I do more on site than online work. I do a lot of clinic work. I do a lot of clinic and mental health work. Is essentially what my community interpreting career consists of. I do a lot of a lot of mental health, a lot of labor and delivery. It's wherever
Hold on.
wherever I'm needed
Did
in
you
the clinic.
say delivery
Labor and delivery.
as an interpreter?
Yeah.
Or are you only focusing on the delivery part, not the labor part?
Because one of them is more quiet than the other.
Right, right. Yeah, sometimes I'm there during an induction, sometimes I'm there towards the end, so it's
No
kind of the luck of the
way.
draw. It's the luck of the draw and when the baby wants to come out.
So do you have to wear like a mask and like scrub up or no?
Like
For C-sections in the OR,
Yeah.
they gave me something they're like, I know you wear, I know you're a scarfy, but we
for
still want you to do what
oh,
to
but for C-section, isn't the patient asleep?
no,
No,
no, no,
it's only
they don't,
from
it's not
the waist down. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not general anesthesia. It's an epidural. And so the patient's awake the entire time. And it was, one of the most surreal experiences, I've had in my life was watching a C-section. Because this person's, wide awake and they're talking to this patient, but at the same time you can see their insides. And watching a person come into this world is really a surreal experience. And I, labor and delivery, my I love labor and delivery assignments.
Wow. Eh,
Have you helped? Have you caught the baby yet or no?
No, afterwards I always get asked, can you take a picture? And I love seeing the parents so excited, and
Oh yeah.
especially the dads when they're like, oh, and they're holding the baby and they're obsessed, and rightfully so. And like, oh, can you take a picture? Can you take a picture? Um,
what part do you translate? Like not everything. It's not like us when simultaneous we say everything. Like you choose, or it's more like the interactions, or how do you choose your moments?
Yeah, yeah. So it's essentially an interaction like any other doctor's appointment. They walk the patient through the epidural, the anesthesia process. They're like, okay, I need you to be, they call it like an angry cat position. They're like, okay, I need you to stick your back out for me to, you're going to feel a prick and a poke, and you walk them through the process. And during during the process they're checking in with the patient, and that do you feel okay, let me know if you feel anything bizarre, lightheaded, do you feel this, they make sure the patient can't feel anything, obviously. So you walk them through the entire process, and afterwards, they tell the patient, like, you're numb now, but you are going to feel pain once the numbness wears off, and things like that.
Do you have to help them with the forms too? Because like you have to sign basically. Well, when my wife had a C-section, she had
Mhm.
to sign her life away basically. So is that
Yeah, this,
in order to give birth to another life?
Yeah, yeah. It's not as invasive as it was in the past, I don't believe. I'm
No.
not an OB. I'm obviously not, an expert in this field. But it's not as in, I had a patient who was like, "Oh, I don't want a C-section because I don't want a huge scar like going up, up and down on my belly." And the
Hmm.
doctor's like, "No, it's actually like a small slit on the lower belly, and they just literally reach in and take the child out." It's not. It's still an invasive surgery, but it's
Yeah.
probably not as invasive as most people think.
Yeah. No, they still cut you all the way down to be able to get the baby out. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah, I've all three of my kids were born C-sections, so that
Oh, okay.
yeah, I can relate. Do you ever get woozy with the sight of
No.
blood, or no? No, you're good with that.
No.
Okay.
No fear of blood.
I would assume that a medical interpreter who gets woozy at the sight of blood may not be as useful when they pass out.
Yeah, no, that wouldn't be good.
So, do you, as an interpreter, like, how does it work? Do you get paid by the hour to stay with the person until they've delivered, or how does that
Yeah.
work as a business? Yeah.
Yeah, so it depends. Unfortunately, it kind of depends on, the agency. Sometimes they say, we need someone from like 6 p.m. to like 6 a.m. and you need to be committed to staying there. Now, legally, they cannot work you for more than 12 hours.
Okay.
So if you tell them
That's a state rule.
I believe so.
Okay.
I just remember my boss telling me, like, legally, when I was hired, they're like, legally, even if you feel fine, legally, we cannot work you more than 12 hours. So whether or not the woman gives birth, you cannot be there for more than 12 hours. And you can go home, sleep, rest, do what you need to do, and maybe come back the next morning. But you're not allowed to be at the clinic. You're not allowed to be there for more than 12 hours.
Can
But
you
yeah, sometimes it's extremely quick. Sometimes you think you're going to be able to witness it and you end up not.
And can you, like, say you're done the 12 hours, but the person's still in labor or whatnot? Do you have someone to relieve you so that the next person can do the next 12 hours, let's say, if it's a 24-hour process?
Yeah, you have a colleague that walks in and you do a switcheroo and you have someone else take over.
tag
Okay.
team?
And if it's like, say, like a 45-minute delivery, like easy peasy, but you're scheduled for 12 hours, do they guarantee that you'll get paid for those 12 hours, or is it just for the 45 minutes, let's say?
No, you're paid as long as you stay there. So even if they tell you, sometimes I have assignments where they're like, "Oh, we only need you for 30 minutes," and the patient ends up asking a lot of questions, and you're there for a lot more than 30 minutes. And no, you get paid a minimum of for the agency I work with, you get a pen, I get paid a minimum of an hour. So there is a minimum, and if you end up staying 2 hours, you get paid 2 hours.
But if they say like you need to be there from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., do they pay you for that amount of time, even though you don't? Maybe it won't be that long. Maybe you're done at 2 or 3.
Oh no, like if let's just say, they say we need someone from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. and the patient ends up giving birth at midnight. No, you get paid up until that midnight. So you don't
I
get
see.
paid that 12
Okay.
hours because you weren't there working. So you're not going to get paid for, for work you didn't do.
I'm just curious because we get paid kind of like a daily rate as interpreters in conferences. So,
Mm.
so we don't do the hourly thing. So it's interesting to see the difference between
Mm.
the hospital setting or conference
Yeah.
setting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because our logic is that okay, if I'm reserving some time on my calendar, even if it's over before the scheduled time, which can happen, then from one day to the next, I can't just take another contract just like that. Maybe in a hospital, there's a high
Mm.
turnover of patients, but when it comes to conferences, maybe you'll have 3 conferences in a week, maybe 5, maybe 2.
Mm.
So you never really know. So you have to plan a lot more. uh, Conferences don't come as many as patients.
Mm. Right, right, and that's absolutely right. No, there's definitely logic behind what you're saying. You booked, if you say yes to a client, and you book yourself for 2 hours, and that's another client you said no to, and you took, that 2 hours you took out of your day, and no, I agree. Yeah.
So you said also you do a lot of stuff related to mental health. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, so I work for an agency that works with refugees, most of which are undocumented. And they provide, like services like legal services. They give them mental health services all for free if they qualify. And yeah, I do a lot of child trauma work, and as well, I also do work with adults who have unfortunately had to, escape, leave their country, who've had to escape their country for whatever reason and have a lot of trauma.
So actually, I discovered you on LinkedIn,
Hmm.
as you and I know, but people who are watching don't. And I saw your post on helping children
Mm.
who went through traumatic experience. Is it something you can share a little?
Yeah, so essentially, sometimes children, they get, their parents want them to have therapy, or the school recommends that they receive therapy. And so I work with a lot of children.
Well, in which language combination?
Spanish and Arabic. Most of my work is in most of my mental health work is in Spanish, though. Yeah, some of these children, it depends on the case. It varies from child to child, the severity.
Is it mostly from Mexico or further in South America, or is there a prevalence like a certain country that has more of a need, or is it
Oh
just
no, no, it can
general?
be anywhere. I've interpreted for Venezuelan children, Mexican children, Honduran children. I had a case of a little Honduran girl who went through, I mean, the most severe trauma. I'm not sure how things are in Honduras right now, but she grew up with a lot of like gang violence, and she lost a family member in a very violent manner. And yeah, I mean, that case killed me a little bit. That you do work with children like that.
It
Wow.
must be heartbreaking sometimes.
How
Very,
how
very.
how young are these children?
9 to 12.
9 to 12.
Sometimes they're adolescents or teenagers, but it's usually 9 to like middle school, young elementary.
Yeah, it's an age when they can be very influenced. They can be influenced so easily by many different things,
Oh yeah.
including traumatisms like that. Yeah.
And but for instance, these children, they have been living in the U.S., but they're not comfortable enough in English, so they would need an interpreter
Exactly.
because they don't speak English at home, I guess.
Exactly. Some of them have only been in the United States for a year, and they know, maybe enough English to, make friends. Kind of, I want this, I want that. Some of them know like basic English, but they can't comfortably communicate, or they have, they just have trouble communicating, or they're more comfortable in Spanish. So they need the help of an interpreter. Yeah.
And have you developed over time some techniques to approach them? Because maybe it's a first time, and getting the trust of a child is sometimes very difficult, especially if they come from difficult backgrounds. So, how do you establish that connection with them? Do you meet them beforehand? Do you explain? What's your approach?
No, usually, me and the therapist, we're a team. So essentially, the therapist usually introduces me, and, I just say, hello, my name is Razan. And, I try to, act, I try to look very relaxed myself and try to give off the vibe that, hey, whatever you say, I'm not judging you. I'm here to help you. So I try, obviously as the interpreter, I can't, I'm not the therapist, right? I can't sit here and talk to them and hi, and this is what I'm, I
Yeah.
can't
Let me take
have,
over.
right, exactly, exactly. I can't do that, but through my facial expression, the tone of my voice, the way I say things, I try to, give off that vibe.
Cool. And what do you do for like if something is just too much? Like, I'm assuming you stick to with it till the end, and then after that have to decompress on your own time, I guess, right?
I have to do what I need to do to get through it, and then I just have to process it later. Exactly. It is not professional to cry in front of a client, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it's not not professional to show a lot of distress in front of the client, because then they feel like they have to comfort you.
Yeah.
um, like they're there, it's okay, it's
You
okay.
become you become the patient or the
You,
client.
yeah.
Mm.
So you can't show a lot of distress, or that you're really in distress from what they're saying. But later you just need to do what you need to do to process.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. And I'm wondering, are there any programs to be able to help you, or do you have to do this all on your own? Because the reason I ask is because we did have someone in season one that was from the International Criminal Court, and they
Hmm.
seem to have like processes in place in case there was a they needed to talk about their mental health and whatnot. But that's more
Yeah.
because they're employees of the International Criminal Court, so they have those services available. But for someone who's like a freelancer, what would be some of the tools or resources that you could have for that kind of situation?
Yeah, yeah. I definitely don't think there's a one size fits all answer. Um, Unfortunately, no, we don't have those services available. Therapists, might a lot of people, might think this sounds ironic, but therapists need therapists too. Uh,
Yes.
if anything, I read this. I think it was a meme that that one therapist friend is the one that needs the most therapy. Therapists, they're just as human as you are. I promise. If anything, if there's anything I've learned in my almost 27 years of life now, it's that all humans, and no human deserves to be on a pedestal. I promise, all humans are just as human as you are. So therapists are trying to figure themselves out too, and therapists need other therapists. You need like personally, I go out for, if I feel like a case was too much, I need to process, I'll like journal, go out for a long walk. But there's definitely not a, you just need to ask yourself, what do I need? And like, what do I need right now? What do I need? The shoving it down and, oh, I'll get numb to this. I've heard people say, like, oh, you'll get numb to it eventually, or, oh, I'm just numb to it. And
Yeah, like
yeah,
the John Wayne syndrome or something like that. Yeah. Like where like you just have to be stoic and keep it in and all that. Like just be the tough guy.
it doesn't work.
Yeah, no,
It
it
doesn't
doesn't.
work.
I open a bottle of wine, eat a
Yeah.
steak, yeah, a bottle of wine, eat a steak, and talk to my wife.
Well, well, the talking to the wife is good. I obviously can't do the wine thing because I'm
I know, I know.
I don't care. I don't know if you can tell by the way I look, but
But yeah, well, I mean, we all have our tricks, right?
we all have
Yeah.
it. Yeah, we all have our coping mechanism. That's
I,
that's very true.
I tend to just cry on Ellen's shoulder, and then it gets better after.
Yeah, no, cry. Do what you need to do to get through it. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm so amazed and in awe of what you do. It's really like inspiring to hear everything that you do with children and with women. And is there one that you like? Is there something that you like a positive part of your profession in terms of like when a baby's born, for example, as opposed to like when you have to hear a child and what they went through? Like, is there like,
Yeah.
is there more like negative than positive, or does one outweigh the other?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, when I started the child trauma, I'm gonna be very blunt and honest. I don't want to
Mhm,
over romanticize what I do. I honestly hated it. I thought I thought about texting my colleague and saying, I'm sorry, not this client. I can't. I'm
mhm,
sorry, this is too much. But little by little, it grew on me and I began to find purpose. Imagine someone talking to you and saying, I feel so relieved now, thank you, or you've given me perspective, or you just need to find purpose in your work.
mhm.
There's definitely purpose behind it. There's purpose in being there during the most important moment of someone's life. There's purpose, being a part of, the absolute worst moment of someone's life. I've had to tell people they have cancer. I've had to tell people that they were going to pass away. It's distressing, but I've found purpose in what I do.
But you're there. I think that a good reminder is that you're really there to help people, and without you, they will be in quite a distress,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, I think that there's something comforting in the thought that we are there to help people rather than just taking everything in. There's a usefulness to what we do.
Yeah,
Right, right, right. Rather than internalize, like rather than looking at it as, oh, this is so depressing,
mhm.
which, it is really sad, but you have to look at it through the lens of purpose.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, you're right, Alain. Like kind of like instead of saying like, "Oh my God, I have to interpret this diagnosis," that's terrible. But it would be worse if this person didn't even understand what this diagnosis was and went home and like didn't even know what to do, or just like it all came unexpectedly to them. So yeah, what you're doing is as an interpreter is so good for that person, even though you're delivering bad news, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, you're talking about the medical setting, and now I have something that happened. Like I have something in mind. In Japan, 6 years ago now, I had a big accident, and I tore. Basically, I had a complete rupture to the on the ligament that holds my patella.
Mm-hmm.
So, long story short, go to the hospital, find a way with my insurance company because I needed surgery.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of days later, they introduced me to the doctor for the surgery. And I speak Japanese, but my Japanese is a
Whoa.
very casual Japanese. It's not something highly advanced or medical or anything. And I requested an interpreter,
Mm.
and they brought an iPad. And then suddenly they turned on the iPad, and on the other side of the screen, there was a Japanese woman, and she was supposed to be the interpreter. But I don't know why they couldn't bring a real person. Right,
Hmm.
I mean, she's real, but on the other side
Right,
of the
right,
screen.
right, right.
So in the end, she couldn't hear well. It didn't go that well, and my Japanese was basically good enough to talk to the doctor, understand everything that was going on. I kind of felt bad for the interpreter, but that was my only experience in a medical setting. Have you ever seen something like that?
Yeah, those are kind of awkward interactions when, you have a nurse. When I have a nurse, for example, who is Mexican American, and there's this kind of like, this is awkward, am I allowed to talk to the patient? Can I say something? Like, we're required to use an interpreter legally, but am I allowed to say? I'm like, yes, please. I don't want you to feel like you have to use me, and sometimes you have a patients who are conversational in English, but they're nervous about medical terminology in English, or what if the doctor uses a word I don't know? So they want an interpreter in case. And then, I've had patients, start to respond in English and go, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." And I'm like, "No, no, no. If you feel comfortable enough, then please, I'll be here when you need me."
Yeah, like
But
a
those
backup. Yeah.
are right, and one of the things I've heard in my training is an interpreter must remain invisible, which there are moments in time when they forget that there's an interpreter and they're just enjoying your rendition, or it's seamless. There are moments where that yeah, obviously very good, but you need to take up space as the interpreter and direct that conversation, right? And you tell
Absolutely.
people, if you catch, and you can always tell, I've learned to really read visual clues, and I can really tell you, I can tell immediately if the patient, understands most of what the doctor's saying or not. And if the patient knows a bunch of English, then you need to, take control of that conversation and say, "Hey, would you like for me to interpret everything, since I see you know a lot of English, or would you like me to be here as needed?"
Yeah.
So you kind of have to, from the very beginning, just you know take control of that. Really, just
Yeah.
take control, and yeah,
I
Do
remember.
more common
Oh,
sense, I guess, right? Like,
yeah,
like basically use your common sense and see like, do they need me for this? Yes, not for that. Okay, so yeah, it's great to be able to be there in person to judge that, because I think like Alain, the way he describes it on an iPad, you can't just be like, oh, my turn. I need to interpret now. Like,
yeah,
it'd be a
yeah.
lot more difficult.
well, I remember when I did when I was studying at Glendon, I did a course on community medical interpretation,
Hmm.
and they were telling us about the different rules because this is a Canadian university, and they were telling us about the different rules between America and Canada. And one of the aspects, if I remember correctly, it's been a few years now, but one of the aspects that seemed different, quite different between Canada and the US was the advocacy part.
Hmm.
And now you just mentioned a moment ago that they tell you to be a bit like in the back and to become invisible. But do you have any advocacy side in your interactions? Or do you really stick to what is said without interference?
No, I definitely advocate when I need to, because and this happens all the time. um you'll have a patient that will smile and nod. Do you have any questions? Nope. Are you sure? Mhm. And then as soon as the doctor walks out, they turn to the interpreter and they're like, "Oh, wait, I have a question. So if I take this pill this day, but I miss, like, what'll happen? What do I do in this case?" And I sit there like, I don't know. I'm not the doctor. They forget that I'm the interpreter, not actually a medical expert. I'm on the, you know, as interpreters, we have a strong general knowledge, but at the end of the day, I can't give somebody medical advice.
Yeah.
They think you're like a nurse or something, and like they treat you kind of like you're a bilingual nurse. And oh, so if I forget to take a pill one day, do I double up on? Do I take 2 pills a night? Like what? And they ask you as if you'd know the answer.
So what do you do in that time? You just go to the doctor once more and say that this patient needs more information?
Exactly. You'd go to the like I always say, oh, that's actually a great question for the doctor. Let's go ask him. I rephrase it like that.
It's a
Like I
good
had a
technique.
patient who said, sorry.
It's a great technique.
Yeah, smart.
I had a patient who said they have no questions, and once the nurse and the doctor left, they're like, "Darn it, I had one more question." And I was like, "Okay, let's go talk to the doctor."
Let's track him down.
Yeah. It's like, I'm sorry, I don't have the answer to your question. Let's go. Why don't we go ask the nurse or the doctor?
Absolutely. Do you ever have to work with midwives with labor and delivery as well, and have that as an intermediary, or no?
I've always worked with doctors and labor and delivery nurses. I don't think I've ever had the opportunity to work with a midwife per se.
Okay, just wondering.
No, it's fine.
I had a midwife. Well, we had a midwife for my 1-year-old, so that's why I was wondering.
Well, what you're telling us now, I have vivid images coming in my mind right now, trying to picture the situation. I'm sure that my mind is completely wrong to what the reality is. But um, it's quite interesting to hear these tales in a hospital. So, do you mainly work in that setting, or do you do other things outside of the medical field?
Occasionally, sometimes I'll get a simultaneous assignment, like a meeting or something, but that doesn't happen very often, unfortunately. I'd love more simultaneous. I'm an adrenaline junkie. I love simultaneous.
So it means that when you're doing the hospital setting, you're doing consecutive interpretation.
Yeah, most of the time. There are definitely exceptions where you have to pull a simultaneous. Like I've worked in a psych ward. I did a 12-hour shift in a psych ward. And sometimes you have that patient that is really emotional, and they're ranting and rambling and they won't ever stop. And you just kind of have to kind of a chuchotage, if you will, and you just have to mumble to the nurse very quickly what they're saying.
So how do you, like, because we, like Brian and I, we deal with people that have sometimes a prepared speech, everything is well constructed and polished and all of that, especially during conferences. But when you're dealing with a more raw situation, how do you judge if you can say something, if you say something, if something might be offensive? How do you deal with all of that?
Yeah, so the best advice I have, I think, is you just have, my professor always used to say, roll with the punches. You have to do the best you can in that moment. I've interpreted for police over the phone, and sometimes you walk into an incredibly a very intense situation. I've had situations where the person was screaming and why am I being arrested and this is bull crap and blah, blah, blah. I've had situations where like somebody in there, like they were like screaming at each other over the phone. This girl's ex, he broke into her house and beat her up really, really bad, and he called her phone, and the doctor, not the doctor, excuse me, the police was like, no, let me answer. And the boyfriend and the girl, they were like screaming, and and in that type of situation, everybody looks at you anxiously and they're like, what are they saying? What are they saying? They're screaming back and forth and they want to know what's going on. And obviously in that situation, you can't be like, excuse me, one at a time. One by one, please.
It's my turn to interpret.
Right, exactly. Please pause for the interpreter. But you just have to, just speak at the same time, mumble, speak at the same time, and do what we call chuchotage, and do
Yeah.
the best you can, even if you miss some information. You really have to roll with the punches.
Yeah, my mom always well, she was a community interpreter for many years, and she did a lot. She ended up doing a lot of hospital work rather than other stuff because it was what she enjoyed, and she felt
Yeah.
pretty scared sometimes when she went, for example, like to the prisons and interpreted for
Yes.
inmates there.
Yes.
Because she's a tiny little woman, she's like 5 foot, barely 5 foot one, I think, and just like tiny and like just she's like I don't feel comfortable with all these big men with tattoos. Like,
Really? I've interpreted at a prison one time and I loved it.
oh
I
yeah,
Wow. A
Yeah,
woman
you
or
are
a
an
men's
adrenaline
prison?
junkie.
I love adrenaline.
A woman or a men's prison?
It was a male prison.
Wow.
Um, I was looking on my, I have a chart, on my end where I can see information about the client. And I saw, what was it? It was like meeting with lawyer or something, like court. So I don't remember the exact words, but I assumed it was like a meeting with a lawyer at a courthouse, maybe like a court assignment. And I walked into this building, and sometimes for like HIPAA or confidentiality, they don't give you too much information, or I don't get a ton of information on my end. Occasionally I will, but not always. And so I literally walk into this building, and it was like an airport, and suddenly I began, they were like, "Are you the interpreter? Come with us." And I went through this like metal detector, and I didn't even know I was like, I didn't even know what was going on, honestly. And they're like, "Do you have any metals on you? Do you have any devices on you?" And I had my iPad, because I usually take notes on my iPad, and like, "You can't have that in here," and I got it taken away. And I literally went through this, like, how they like scan luggage or
Yeah.
luggage at the airport? I literally had to go through a human thing. And before I know it, like, huge, I mean, huge,
You
thick
had to lie
doors
down on the
open.
carousel, and
Yeah, on
just
the conveyor belt.
Yeah, no, I on a human conveyor belt, literally.
Wow.
And I walk and and these huge doors open, and I'm like, and I see a bunch of men in like orange uniforms, and that's when it hit me, and I was like, holy crap, I'm in a prison.
hold
I'm
on. But
actually
you
in a
did
prison.
you must have known you were in a prison before that.
I don't think it quite clicked until then. Like, to me, I thought it was like
From the look outside the building.
surprisingly, it didn't really look. I,
As threatening as the people inside.
It was it's not a federal prison. It was, what do you call them? One of those prisons where they,
Like a state prison or minimum security.
yeah, it was pretty. I don't think it was maximum security. It was, where they house people essentially until their court or their hearing.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like this. But I mean, surprisingly, on the outside, it doesn't scream prison, or if you were passing by. I mean, yeah, nothing, really screamed prison.
Yeah.
Oh, it's okay. I
That's
always have
crazy.
the Breaking Bad, not Breaking Bad. Sorry, Prison Break. Yeah, that
Prison.
show, Prison Break. I have
Yeah.
that image in my mind.
Yeah. American
What?
television will do that to you.
So,
Yeah.
and how was the experience? Like, what about the interaction? The inmate was chained, or was
Yeah, I've worked with high profile inmates, but this individual in person wasn't there for drugs. So he wasn't shackled or anything. He was literally sitting right across from me, just in an orange uniform. He wasn't, he wasn't dangerous at all. I interpreted for an individual in what do you call it, in segregation, who was in there for, murder, and they obviously didn't let me anywhere near him. It had to be on Zoom. But yeah, no, this individual was not a high profile, murder or anything like that. But I remember all my work with inmates prior to that experience had been on Zoom. And I remember, they knew a Spanish interpreter was coming, and as soon as they saw me on video, one of the inmates just started cracking up. And it's happened before, they like he just like busted out laughing, and he was like I can't believe this is my Spanish interpreter. Are you kidding me? I was like, like a young 22-year-old, sitting there.
They were like judging a book by its cover. Is it
They're
like
like, really? Like, and I've actually had a patient who, like, as soon as they saw me, they just started laughing, and they're like, Spanish interpreter. Like, really? Like, Spanish interpreter? Um, yeah, I've had doctors think there was a mistake, and they're like, are you here, like for Arabic? And I'm like, nope, Spanish. And they're like, wait, we messed up. We asked for a Spanish interpreter. But that happens occasionally, yeah.
Oh man. And you're in Missouri, right? You said?
Yeah.
So there's work in Missouri. Could you work like every day of the year if you wanted to? Like, is there that much work, or is it how much work is there in Missouri in interpretation?
Yeah, so, well, technically I could work every day, but, I've made the decision that, I don't work on the weekends. That's just a personal, boundary I've sent,
It's a good one.
or that
Yeah,
I've set, I
me-
think.
our own mental health.
Yes.
Exactly.
Mental
I
health.
think, quality, over quantity. I need time to recharge and fill up my own, to recharge, I guess, in order to do a good job, especially with mental health clients. So, but I technically could accept assignments every day if I wanted to. I Yeah, especially because I work online, I could. And especially at a clinic, there's always the hospital doesn't close on the weekends, right?
No.
Um, so so yeah, there are assignments every day. Yeah,
No babies. Only between 9 to 5 on Monday to
Monday to
Friday.
Friday, 9 to 5.
Just like when they're crying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but one of the last questions we
Yeah,
we always ask people,
yeah.
and it might seem silly in your setting, but I do have to ask.
I know where you're going.
Well, because we've been doing so many episodes together. But what about AI? Do you think it has an impact
Mm.
on your work? Do you think someday the robot will be helping with the delivery, or you're in such a real setting with real people that AI will never be able to replace you? How do you feel
Wow.
about all that?
Wow, that is that is a very controversial question among interpreters. I have some colleagues who are like, we're doomed. And other colleagues who are like, optimistic, no, it'll never replace us. As for the technology aspect, I think we always predict things about technology and we're almost always wrong. But on the other side of the coin, we're able to do things we never thought was possible. So with the technology aspect, I think I'm really unqualified to tell you, how much technology will advance and who knows what the future will bring. But in the mental health, I do not think in my lifetime, anyways, a machine will replace medical interpreters. Just because of that human aspect. People, no matter how good or accurate a computer is, people want a human with them during like we said, like the labor and delivery process, or during a diagnosis, or during an important phase in their life. You don't want a machine.
Hmm.
But we're seeing, and I've heard somebody say this. Will lower end interpreting jobs be taken or replaced? Yes, no, maybe so, probably.
What do you mean
Um,
by lower end?
Oh, like as in maybe lower end was the wrong word. Not lower end, but maybe, now like in a AI, is okay to use an AI translator, I think, in a situation where there is no consequences if there's a mistake, like in a social situation.
That's a good way to say it. I like it.
Right.
When there's no consequences, there are no threatening consequences, or like somebody's life in danger, or a contract or something.
Exactly. So in no risk situations, AI might replace those types of interpreters where they interpret in very non-risky situations. But the higher end, like UN medical interpreters, I don't think in my lifetime, anyways, will be replaced that easily. But we're trying to use AI as a tool and as an ally, not see it as our enemy for now.
In what way?
Well, I like personally, like sometimes I'll ask AI, like ChatGPT, like, oh, is it more natural to say something in French like this or like this? Is You know what I mean? And it comes really in handy, sometimes, like, um, in like, oh, so what word do they use for this in this country? You know what I mean? So I think, you can ask AI to make a glossary for you to save you time for a conference. Does that make sense? Be like sometimes I'm like let's just say I have an assignment. Like sometimes on ChatGPT, I'm like, oh, I have for example, a labor and delivery assignment. Can you give me a bunch of important words that are related to this topic? And I sit there and read all the list of words they give me, and it comes in handy.
That's really cool. Yeah, that's kind of what we do too with conference interpretation. We use AI to be able to expand our glossaries, and sometimes too to translate, say, like a PowerPoint presentation real quick. And you're not gonna use it verbatim, but it at least gives you
Right,
a bit of a crutch instead of coming in empty-handed. Yeah.
right, right.
Well, so far I see it as a tool that helps us rather
Yes.
than something that is replacing us.
Yes.
And I think that there is a very big distinction here. But in terms of replacing, well, I'm one of the optimistic side.
Okay.
Personally, I know that a lot of people differ. Some people are sometimes afraid. Some people come to our podcast and say the exact opposite. But that's that's what life is. We don't always have to think alike. But in my case,
Right.
I so far, I think that if you're versatile enough and you specialize and you go into the right way, then I think that there's nothing to fear so far.
Yeah. And like you, as someone who has purpose and feels that this is your calling, like I don't think there should be anything stopping you when you find your calling.
Yeah, I don't think us mental health interpreters are going anywhere anytime soon.
No.
Well,
But thank you so much for coming on our podcast, for agreeing to come on. And yeah, you're an inspiration. You've been
Oh, that's so kind.
I
I
wish
learned
we
a
had
lot.
another 45 minutes, and we say this every time we
Yeah.
run out of
Thank
time.
you.
But
This was a great conversation. Thank you so much for having me.
absolutely, yes, and we'd be happy to have you again.
That would
Well,
be great.
yeah,
Anytime.
well, pleasure. Well,
Pleasure's mine.
just like Brian, thank you so much for coming. I've learned a lot, and I have images of a delivery and an interpreter and the C-section and the baby and the blood and all of that. Wow. You've made my day. So,
Oh, that's so nice.
all right. Thank you everyone for watching. Please don't forget to share, subscribe, comment, post it. These are very interesting human conversations that we have here at Fun and Interpretation Podcast. Brian, thank you as well for coming as well. Razan, nice meeting you, and we'll
Likewise.
definitely chat again in the near future.
Most
Hopefully.
definitely.
All right, everyone. Good night and good luck.
All right, take care.